Hello again. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm Frederica Whitfield. All right, the Comey testimony is over, but the challenges for the Trump White House are really as big as ever. President Trump's attorney general and some of his closest advisors are under fire. Is there anything Trump can learn from history to deal with this crisis? My next guest says the president only has to look back to the Clinton presidency and the Whitewater scandal and investigation. James Hohmann is the national political correspondent for the Washington Post. Good to see you.
Good to be with you, Frederica.
So the first comparison you make to Whitewater is how this investigation will open up the inner workings of the Trump empire. How do you expect it to unfold?
These things just don't go away. Once they start turning over rocks, it takes a very, very long time to exhaust every line of inquiry. What started in the early 90s as an investigation into a land deal in rural Arkansas ended up leading to the impeachment of Bill Clinton over him not telling the truth.
The Monica Lewinsky
Exactly,
stuff.
Leading to Monica Lewinsky. So once Bob Mueller begins this investigation, what several Clinton alumni tell me, and there's no love lost for Donald Trump there, but they say Trump should learn from their experience, because once they start turning over rocks, they're going to look at the whole inner workings of the Trump empire. They're going to look at his tax returns, which we still have never seen. They're going to look at his associates and their business dealings. And what they say is those things are a million times more complicated than Bill and Hillary Clinton's financial dealings in the early 90s. So there's just a lot more for the investigators to go through, and that means it's going to take a lot more time.
So while Trump has been able to leverage kind of executive privilege to, keep certain things private, might he not be able to do that, especially as it pertains to his tax returns?
So there's a lot of legal precedent from the Clinton era that is more relevant to the Trump case than any of the Richard Nixon stuff. We like to talk about Watergate all the time, but there were a couple key court decisions in the 90s about Bill Clinton and what rights he had and what rights his lawyers had to keep some of their notes private, and those are pertinent to Trump. So I think that there's a lot of stuff. I think certainly Bob Mueller, the special counsel, is going to be able to get access to Trump's tax returns. Whether or not he releases those publicly, we don't know. We don't know how this ends. But there's no question FBI agents are reviewing them or already have reviewed them, but that would end up being pertinent to their investigation.
And then you talk about the fog of war. It's been written about in so many different, circumstances as it applies to the White House. So what impact does it have when an investigation does get into full gear in this case?
So there's so many things that could end up being important that we don't know about now, where, what was said in some meeting on May 13th of a year ago becomes relevant. And so anyone sitting in the meeting could end up theoretically having to appear before a grand jury or get interviewed by FBI agents. And if there's any inconsistencies between the different stories that people tell of that meeting, all of a sudden they could get in trouble for making false statements to the FBI. And so a lot of even junior staffers end up having to get lawyers to make sure that they don't end up in legal peril. And what happens is you're not really allowed to coordinate about what your statements are to get your story straight. And so you have this fog of war mentality where you don't know if your colleague and friend has had to appear before a grand jury and what they might have told the grand jury about you. And all of a sudden, the web just kind of keeps getting bigger and bigger. And it makes people, you need an esprit de corps in the White House to get stuff done. And all of a sudden, maybe you're not as trustful, or maybe it's hard to communicate. Maybe there are certain meetings you try to stay out of because you don't want to have to hire a lawyer. And that just imperils the workings of a White House. It's already hard enough to get anything done if you're president. It all of a sudden gets much, much harder if you're under the kind of legal cloud that the Trump White House is.
So a lot of what you're speaking to also means it speaks to organization and logging. And we know that this White House is not big on the whole logging of guests, for example. So if there isn't that kind of documentation of things, of meetings, of people, then that might make it fairly difficult for those who are investigating as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. I think that the question is, are Trump folks, because they're concerned about the investigation, going to not keep records? Are there things they're not going to write down because they don't want them to end up getting uncovered as part of the investigation? Or will people write everything down to try and cover themselves in the event that something becomes problematic later? Different people will respond in different ways, but the point is the cloud that hangs over the White House is going to affect everything, every policy, everything that they're trying to do. Bill Clinton was actually able to get quite a lot done even while he was under investigation, so it doesn't mean you can't do anything, but this is something that the Clinton people tell me could very well last beyond Trump's presidency. Even if he's in office till 2020, 2024, this investigation could drag on, and just this cloud may never go away.
All right, James Hohmann, it is all very fascinating, continues to get even more so. All right, thanks for joining us from Washington.